Thank you. Okay. Well, my question has to do with so many of us here are uplifters and wish to be for our friends and loved ones and others. And I have experience with the form of uplifting, of help for people who have been in trauma that would seem to be philosophically in contradiction to law of attraction, yet by my experience it works very well and very efficiently.
Then it must not be in contrast to law of attraction.
It must not be.
So let's sort it out.
It's basically when someone is living constantly a past trauma and they can't seem to break away from it, the momentum is great. The therapy is very simple. You bring them back to that moment and have them re-experience it in a very real way, and you see them in a matter of minutes rise up from being traumatized to feeling a little bit better, to releasing it, to then feeling appreciative and perhaps finding all the positive in it.
These are our questions about that. So they lived some trauma, let's say for the sake of our twisting your example, some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, they've lived life. And would you say, we're really asking you, we're not trying to make you say something that you don't want to say. Would you say that during that traumatic experience that they put things into their vortex? That in knowing what they didn't want, they put things there? And would you say that in the time that has passed since, they've done it too, so that their vortex has continued to evolve? Vibrationally speaking, they have been becoming more of who they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And that in some cases, they've allowed themselves to catch up with that new perspective. What we're asking is, do you think that they are different now, even though they've had that trauma, than they were when they lived the trauma? That their now perspective is different?
Absolutely. Certainly their desires have kept
Is it logical
evolving.
that when you take them back to the details of that, maybe they experienced it when they were a child and now they're not, is it logical that they might be seeing it through different eyes now, and so they could release some of the resistance because they're seeing it differently now than they saw it then?
Mm-hmm.
So now take a big step beyond that and imagine how your inner being is seeing everything that you live. Even then, their inner being had a different perspective. Every step along the way, your inner being has that broader point of view
Mm-hmm.
than you do. So it does seem logical, doesn't it, that as you stand in a more stable place and look back at something that's really been bothering you, that you could actually bridge your belief about what happened from your now perspective. Does that seem
Right.
logical?
I mean, you can definitely see them as they keep perhaps not desiring to, but sort of getting caught back in this experience more and more and more. I don't want that. I really don't want that. Oh, I so don't want that anymore.
Well, here's a big question that we have about that, because we know by the way you began here that you know that we're not really big proponents of looking back, because
Right.
your inner being never does. Your
Right.
inner being isn't looking back. Here's another question. Do you run across situations where someone has experienced something traumatic and that their point of view doesn't seem to have changed at all, because they've remembered it and talked about it and talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, so they've kept that trauma so alive? And under those conditions, do you get the same positive results when you go back and relive it, since they haven't moved far from it?
That's a good question. I haven't looked at it from that perspective.
Look at it from that perspective.
Because sometimes it doesn't work.
And that's why. That's why. Because you see, once they've already bridged, and then you look back from your new, clearer place, then you bring that all up. That's what growing up feels like to you. You don't feel the same insecurities that you did over some things. So this is what we're asking you, all of you, to feel with us. Imagine how glorious it could be to meditate or appreciate or bask or whatever it takes to get you in the receiving mode, and then stand in connection with who you are and know so clearly who you are, and then maybe approach some of those things. Seeing through the eyes of Source is the most delicious thing. Esther went to get her new driver's license in a new state, and when she looked through the contraption, she couldn't read anything. And she said to the lady, "This is broken." But it had been a long time since she'd looked into one of those things. And so the woman said, "Well, you're going to have to go get your eyes checked and get some glasses and then come back and do this again, because you have to be able to see this." And Esther said, "Abraham, can you read this?" And we did. We just tipped her eyes, focused them a little different, stood her up straighter, looked out of the top of her eyes, then out of the bottom of her eyes, played with her eyes a little bit until she knew we were in her eyes, and then we looked, and we read it. Same eyes, just different expectation, you see. And that's what you've got going on with your inner being all the time. Same opportunity to look at same events and same situations, but the vibrational knowing of your inner being, the leverage that you get by your inner being loving you and knowing your worthiness, carries you so far. That's what clarity and security and stability and balance all feel like. It's the leverage of that alignment, you see. So we're certainly not arguing with your technique at all, because we think anything that causes someone to realize that things are working out for them is to their advantage. And it's a lovely thing to bridge beliefs. But if we could convince you that you've got nothing to bridge and that you don't have to undo anything, you don't have to burn the house down in order to allow yourself a new house.
From my point of view and experience, it's just a matter of practicalities. You see the train pulling in both directions, and sometimes this one just won't stop pulling, so I adjust that one, bang, the train goes.
Well, we've been teaching some of that too, as we've been saying, if you can release resistance, it's so much better. We just have never really seen anyone effectively release resistance when they're looking right at whatever they think caused it. Usually they have to look in the direction of what they want, not in the direction of what caused it. But again, what you're accomplishing there, it's valid. It does not defy law of attraction. There might be easier ways to go about it. But you know, sometimes when someone's really believing that this matters, they do want to talk about it. And if in talking about it, some different light can be shed on it, you saw that happen here today. That was sort of kind of what we were doing here today, wasn't it?
Right, just had to understand the resistance a little bit better.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
Satisfied?
Mm-hmm.
Really good.
Thank you.